UFC has been on the decline since 2016. You can point to several factors as to why. It's a cyclical business. Much like the NBA, the UFC is dependent on superstar talent to succeed. People aren't going to pay to watch two guys they have no emotional investment in fight. The fight doesn't sell the pay-per-views. The fighters do. The hype going into it. That's why the biggest UFC events most of the time are tied to fighters who have personal beef with each other. Going into UFC 246 last night, I actually talked about this last week, it didn't feel like a typical Conor McGregor fight. There was very little hype going into this event because McGregor and Cerrone really didn't have any personal animosity towards each other. Dana White had an opportunity that he hasn't had since taking all pay-per-views exclusive to ESPN+. For the first time since this transition, the King was back. The only crossover mainstream star left in the UFC, Conor McGregor, was returning to the octagon. Guys like me who used to buy UFC pay-per-views on a somewhat regular basis, 3 or 4 a year, the big events, but I haven't spent $1 on a UFC fight since they moved to ESPN+, decided to part with $85 to see this fight. And it was a colossal disappointment. And I'm not just talking about the main event, which went all of 40 fucking seconds. The entire card was bullshit. Anthony Pettis shit the bed. Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington went 3 rounds in a glorified hugging contest. The fans booed the hell out of them for 15 minutes, causing Holly Holm to actually apologize to the audience after the fight for putting everyone in a coma. If I wanted to watch 2 girls hug on each other for 15 minutes, I would just jump on YouPorn and watch it for free. At least they would be naked then. When talking with Brian Salmon the other day, I mentioned that this felt like a warm-up fight for Conor McGregor. And this is nothing new in the fight game. Mike Tyson's fight with Buster Douglas was supposed to be a warm-up fight before the big money fight with Evander Holyfield. They had to take it all the way over to Japan because people in America weren't paying to watch it. One thing I like about Dana White is he's brutally honest, but he straight out lied to us in the lead up to UFC 246. In an interview with TSN, which I believe is the equivalent to ESPN in Canada, he said the UFC doesn't do setup fights, warm-up fights, easy fights. He says fighters here fight nothing but killers. If that's the case, then what the fuck do you call last night's main event? To me, that was the definition of a warm-up fight. What about Greg Hardy's weak opponents since he's joined the UFC? What about CM fucking Punk? A guy with no UFC experience gets 2 pay-per-view fights. I don't have a problem with warm-up fights. I don't have a problem with you doing it. But if I'm paying $65 or $85, the pay-per-view damn well better be good. It better be entertaining. Last night, Dana White needed his undercard to deliver. And they shit the bed. I don't know who he awarded the Fight of the Night bonus to, but he should have just put that money in his own pocket. Not one fight on that card was entertaining. It was a 3-hour snooze fest. The main event was never going to be a classic. It was all about reintroducing Conor McGregor. And I like Conor McGregor. I think he's a great fighter. He's definitely the most entertaining fighter in UFC. But we learned nothing about him last night. Going into the event, ESPN and UFC were hyping up Donald Cerrone as this great fighter. He's got the most wins in UFC history. The guy's never fought on a fucking pay-per-view before. Obviously, the spotlight was too big. The guy got hit with a couple of shoulder bumps and he rolled over and died. This was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, for Dana White and UFC. For the first time in 4 years, You had the attention of the entire world. You had the casual audience back. And this is what you gave us? For 3 hours last night, Twitter was pissed off. People were bored. They were making fun of people who paid the $65 or $85 to watch this event. I was one of the dumbasses that paid to watch this fight. And like a lot of people, I feel like I was ripped off. This is the problem with UFC. If I watch a boring Super Bowl like last year between the Patriots and Rams, I'm disappointed, but I'm not pissed off. I had to pay a dime to watch it. I don't feel like I was ripped off. Last night, we were bamboozled by UFC. This fight was booked to get Conor McGregor an easy win, plain and simple. Dana White couldn't afford his biggest star to take a loss in his return fight. Because if he matched him up with Khabib or Jorge Masvidal, that's exactly what would have happened. I know Dana's saying McGregor's next fight's going to be against Khabib, but I don't think they can wait that long. Khabib's fighting Tony Ferguson in April, so the soonest he could match up with McGregor is in the fall. With McGregor wanting 3 fights this year, I just don't see him waiting that long to fight Khabib. Like I said last week, book him with Nate Diaz. They've got personal beef, both have a win over each other, and they're both great shit talkers. There'd be no problem hyping up that fight. And I'd gladly pay $65 to watch it. And UFC should basically give it to me for free since they stole $85 from me last night. That's all I got to say. I'll be back Tuesday to recap the rest of the weekend. Enjoy your Sunday, guys.